What's up, Eugene? You're listening to the Eugene Morning Hustle podcast, brought to you by the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce. We're your hosts, Brandon Miller and Ivan Torres, and like us, we know you'd like to know what's going on in your city, socially, economically, civically, and culturally. From events to guest interviews and professional and personal development tips, each week we bring you stories of local business owners, advocates, leaders, and everyday Eugenians sharing how they've strengthened their roots to reach a little deeper in our community, and how you can too. So we were just talking about being able to reach out to somebody, right? Mm-hmm. So if you want to know something, you can just reach out to somebody. It's not really as scary as we make it up in our own heads, right? So do you have a recent moment where you did something like that, where you were like, well, the only way for me to get this information is to reach out to this person, but you're a little apprehensive?
Yes. Working at the credit union, I don't know that I would say recent, but definitely talking to upper management. Mm-hmm. Just I work a lot with my CEOs, so whenever that first got introduced, I had to communicate a lot, and I was like, okay, this is it. They're gonna get this. I had never been so worried about my grammar, my punctuation, making sure that everything was perfect, that it was formatted perfectly. Why? It's just an email. And the email says, hey, I need you to wear a white shirt. Right. Hey, it's for the shoe. I just need you to wear a white shirt. But man, so much thought goes into it.
Per my last email, I asked about a white shirt, possibly starched. But if you don't want it starched, I totally understand.
It's totally fine.
Totally fine.
If you want it black, that's fine too.
You know what? Just don't even worry about the shirt.
Don't wear a shirt.
It's fine.
Don't wear a shirt.
But yes, you're overthinking every little detail because you have this thought in your head of they're on a pedestal,
yes.
right? They're more important than me.
100%.
Which, that's not the case because we're all just humans, right?
Agreed.
And I think, even to get a CEO's perspective on this of that people below you feel like they can't reach out to you. How does that make you feel, right?
Yeah, totally. And it's really nothing on them. Mm-hmm. My CEOs have never done anything to make me feel like they're so big and scary.
Exactly. It's stuff we make up in our own head. And
there's really no way to get out of it other than just hitting send.
Yeah, there's this kind of thing that I've done over the years where it's kind of this countdown. I count to 5, right? I go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, do the thing.
Okay.
No matter what it is, if it's something that scares the hell out of me or I'm nervous about it, I know that I can just do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, just do the thing. Hit the send button, do the thing, right? Make the post, stop, walk into this business, for the first time, or whatever it may be. You just do the countdown and then you do the thing because it doesn't give you enough time to think about backing out.
As soon as you have enough time to think, that's when everything.
I got a story that actually goes really well with what we're talking about here. So, back in my early acting days, I think I was 20 or 19 or something like that. I wanted to be I'd never auditioned before in my life, and I wanted to audition for this role in Pinocchio. It was at the at a children's dinner theater back when I lived in Omaha, and it was a production of Pinocchio, and they were looking for somebody to play Geppetto, and I was a little older. I was 19, right? And so I thought, oh, this is going to be my first in. But somebody that I was being mentored by, I would bring the newspaper because this was before smartphones and things like that. Remember those days? So I would bring the newspaper, and every week I would talk to him and say, oh, there's audition is coming up. Man, I would love to do that. But man, I'm so nervous. I'm so scared to even just get in front of people and do that sort of thing. And he said, I'm sick of this. Every single week you bring the newspaper and you say how much you want to audition for this particular play.
Yeah.
And you don't do it. how about this? Make a deal with me. All you have to do is open the door and put your foot in. Physically put your foot in. And if you want to leave at that point because you're scared, you should do it. Like, just leave. But all you have to do is just open the door, put your foot physically in the door, and then you can leave. So I said, okay, deal.
Motion out there.
So I went, put my foot in the door, and I felt like, wow, it'd be kind of awkward if I just left.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I guess I'm doing this thing now.
Yeah.
So I went and sat down, and I waited for my number to be called to go up and audition. And I was nervous and scared and all that, but I did the audition, left. I felt great. You know, of course, you're being critical of yourself because you're thinking, I could have done better. I could have done this.
Yeah.
But you feel great because I did the thing, right? And went home. Sure enough, you know, found out later that I didn't get the role. And
How did that make you feel?
I was a little crushed.
Yeah.
I was a little crushed. I thought, okay, well, I was glad I did the thing, but I was disappointed that it didn't work out for me. Well, and about 2 months later, I get a phone call, and they want me in another production. They wanted me in The Jungle Book.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they said, you don't even have to audition for it. We loved what you did in the Geppetto role for Pinocchio. We'd love you to be Shere Khan, the tiger, the villain in this play.
Nice.
So that all worked out, right? All because somebody told me to just put my foot into the door, like in the doorway, and if I want to leave, I could, right? That is what took my acting career and just it started to become a thing, because somebody said, you know what, just do a little bit of it.
Yeah.
And as you're doing the little bit of it, you can't help but continue to go through with it.
Right. Yeah. That's amazing, dude. I use a very similar system for me going to the gym.
Oh yeah.
I never wake up and say I want to go to the gym. When the time comes around, I never say I want to go to the gym. Instead, I just tell myself, go to the gym, and if you don't feel like working out, you can drive back home.
True.
I get there, and it takes me 10 minutes to get out there. I'm just like, well, I'm already here. But the thing is, it's seeing everybody else doing it. I think that motivates you heavily. So you walking in there, seeing everybody else doing it, it really makes it feel possible, right? And I think that that little movement just shows you that it's a possibility, and that, you know, why not take it? So.
On today's episode, we have Henry Fields with the Oregon Employment Office. Take it away, Henry.
My name is Henry Fields. I work for the state of Oregon's Employment Department, and I work as a workforce analyst, which is a job that doesn't really exist in any other state that I'm aware of. Basically, my job is, my fancy title is that I'm an economist. I only throw that around if I'm like trying to get some cachet at parties or something like that. But no, basically what it means is I am the type of economist that tries to help people get access to the data they need. So as a way of explanation, like every state has their labor market information people that put together things like the unemployment rate and jobs and things like that. But very few states have a really great way for people to access that information. And my whole role is to make sure that people can access the information. So I live here in Eugene. I cover this area. And my day in, day out work centers around making sure that either businesses or job seekers or students or whoever needs that information is getting what they need out of it. So I have whenever I talk about my job, I have an incredibly fun, interesting, unique role that I couldn't really have very many other places in the U.S. So my personality is I really like data, but I am not the sort of person that is just going to be working on data all day long. That would drive me insane. And I also get to interact with people. You know, one of the more fun things about working in this community is I get to find out all the cool things that people are doing all across the community in a really fun way, and help them get access to what they need, whether that's, you know, what's a competitive wage for our industry? What's happening with the workforce? What does 4% unemployment mean?
Right.
What does the future look like? Basically, we cover primarily things like employment, wages, that kind of stuff, you know, the stuff that you would expect from the state employment department.
Right.
But then we also have access to, and I can help people get access to information about the workforce, about demographics in our area, about what's projected to come, population. There's so much interesting stuff that hopefully, you know, when people hear data, sometimes they have a viewpoint of like data is this thing that's locked behind a closed door that, you know, I will occasionally care about. I try to make that much more relevant to what people are looking for, because my experience on this job has been there is so much fascinating stuff and more coming out every day that everyone has some interest in what's going on. If nothing else, people want to know, what are competitive wages? How does my wage compare to other people that are doing this type of work? Or what are my growth potential? What other types of jobs could I do with these interests? There's so many questions that center around data and econ that are really fun in that way. So that's a somewhat short explanation of what I do.
What made you go into this industry?
I kind of backed into it a little bit. So I went to U of O, and I really liked a lot of. So I studied poli-sci in undergrad, and it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of really interesting experiences. I did debate for the University of Oregon. I really like working with people and talking over ideas. Then I graduated kind of at the tail end of the last recession in 2012, and didn't really have a lot of ways to turn that into marketable skills in terms of the things that people were looking for at that time. So went to graduate school in Indiana and got a little bit more of the skills in econ and statistics to kind of marry up those two sides of my personality I was talking about before. Some data, some people. And really was the whole time preparing for this role that I did not know existed. So again, got very lucky with how I did my career trajectory. But yeah, when this job opened up, we lived a couple different places in the U.S. I had gone to school in Eugene and knew I loved the area, and then this job opened up here, and it was just this incredibly lucky match that came through. What I always try to tell people that are thinking about their career is pursuing what you are interested in is a really good way to stay prepared in that field, right? So the more I learned about how to access data on the economy and really this passion that I had developed by learning more about like what people do. So just to back up a little bit, like a lot of what I do is basically like I'm on like a middle school career trip every single day, right? Like, oh, I didn't know that person did that, or what type of work is what's done in that mill down the street, or I didn't know they made, bicycle parts here. Who does that kind of work? Or what does an accountant really do with their day? All this type of interesting stuff that there's just more layers than you could ever imagine. So really what kind of drew me in and continues to draw me in is this idea of like, there's so much going on in the economy, and I'm fascinated by these questions of like what people spend their time doing and that kind of thing that just keeps me hooked in that type of, world.
What makes Eugene unique when it comes to the work that you do based on anywhere else in the country?
Yeah, I love answering this question because I think people do tend to focus on like, well, let me say this. Yeah. There are plenty of things about the economy that we have no control over that aren't fundamentally different here than they would be in, Indianapolis or Washington, D.C. or rural Kentucky, whatever, right? They're driven by what's happening in the U.S. or in the world even, right? But I always find it really fascinating to think about like, how have we arrived at this place in this economy in this area? And there's a ton of stuff that goes into it. A couple of things that I think are really fascinating. So Eugene is a, medium-sized metro area, has a little bit of city, a little bit of rural, kind of all rolled up in one ball, and that has an effect on the economy. But in terms of what is unique here, there's a whole mix of industries that we kind of punch above our weight in terms of employment that they affect the people that you meet on the street and the types of things people do for fun, that kind of thing. So let me give you a couple examples. So we have a couple industries that are either world leading or, a much bigger than you would expect for a community our size. Some examples being like we have some really unique pockets of manufacturing. There's so much going on in manufacturing here that there's actually more jobs in manufacturing in Lane County as a percentage than there are relative to the U.S., which is something when I first started this job, I kind of thought of Eugene as a college town, right?
Right.
And there's several colleges. It does have that, but there's so much more happening behind the scenes. There's kind of unique pockets of food and beverage manufacturing. Obviously, there's wood products that has been a real an industry for centuries in this area, and there's a reason for that because both for food and wood, lots of really interesting products are grown right outside our door, right? So there's healthcare, which, yes, is an important industry nationally, but we have people come from the rural areas surrounding Eugene for their healthcare, and that creates an environment where healthcare workers move here from many other places in the U.S. And just like the U of O, it's a great kind of connection point for lots of different types of people moving here, which is another thing that makes our economy and area kind of unique. We attract more people from outside most years from most places than we send to them. So you'll probably notice when you talk to people around Eugene, a lot of people weren't born here, and that's typical for Oregon. A lot of people, are here for education and stay. There's lots of different paths that people take here to get here. And it adds to the economic dynamism of our area in a way that's super, super interesting. There's just more. There's more vitality. There's more people bringing their business ideas or skills to the workforce in a way that we sometimes even take for granted. Not every area has that going on.
So when you were talking about manufacturing, you were talking about a little bit about healthcare being big industries in our community. Where are you seeing available jobs and where are you seeing, or I guess that would be kind of like a fast growing industry or something like that versus something on kind of a slower growth, but there will be opportunities to look out for them if you're interested in that, because, people are going to be, retiring.
Yes.
People are going to be, changing careers, right?
Totally.
So where should people start looking, whether they're ready now or they're like, well, some of our listeners could certainly be like, I'm going to be graduating in a few years. So what should I look for?
Yeah. So there's one thing that I'm talking about a lot right now to help people kind of understand that exact question you're talking about is, yes, there are industries that are growing a lot faster than others, but just because of how the workforce changes, how there's more retirements now than there were 20 years ago, really every industry, about 90% of all job openings in every industry and every occupation are due to replacement. So the point of that is to say, even like a really slow growth industry or occupation, say somebody is graduating with the skills and interest to do something that is not growing that quickly. There's still likely to be a lot of opportunities for someone with the right skill set because folks are retiring, they're moving out of the workforce, and there's just a lot of churn in the workforce in general. So that's not to say that if you have an interest, you shouldn't have an eye on those kind of like high growth job opportunities. So for example, some of the faster growing industries in our area are things like healthcare, things like leisure and hospitality. Construction has grown really well in the last couple of years. So if folks have an interest in those things, absolutely pursue them. But one of the, most interesting points, we track data on dozens of industries and 800 occupations, from everything from, a registered nurse that most people have a general idea of to, very specific construction or tech occupations that honestly, by the time I started this job, I had never even heard of, right? Like, what does a Boilermaker do? You can find data on Boilermakers and what they do.
As far as I know, it's a drink that you can get at a bar. So.
It's the weird Purdue mascot. Purdue University is the Boilermakers, like these kind of things, But it's funny. All that to say, not that every occupation is created equal in that front, but that's an example of why data is I sound like a data shill, but I'm serious. Like it's interesting because if you're well informed about the thing that you want to do or the industry that you care about, it's relatively easy or easier than it has been in last generations to be well prepared for where you can slot into that, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And how can one be prepared?
Yeah. So making sure that you're abreast of the data is really important in terms of, if you're graduating and have a good idea of what local wages look like, you can do that in a way that I didn't know how to when I graduated college or high school, or, fully investigating your options. But in general, there's lots of ways. So we have a data website, qualityinfo.org, which is where the state shares a lot of this information. It's where, I write articles and stuff like that. But basically, we have a lot of tools to be able to access. So if you're trying to figure out what a Boilermaker is or whatever the case is, you can go see, what environment does that person work in and what are they asked to do on a daily basis? Is like the most bizarre example, Boilermaker, but you know what I'm saying? Like there's some very niche careers, right? What does a power plant operator do? What does an electrician do on a daily basis? What should I be prepared to do? Or what type of careers that fit in my skill set and my interest range do I actually exist that I might not know about beforehand, right? So anyway, it's been really fun to help people get their arms around that because everybody has an avenue into this stuff. Like, it doesn't matter whether you're like advising your kid nephew who's 16, right? Like, here's what you should think about. Did you know that somebody does this job, or you yourself, or you're trying to hire that person? Like, there really is an angle on all that data for everybody, you know?
So if somebody was interested about a particular career, right? They're like, I want to, either they're, almost done with college, or they've been in the workforce for a while, but they're like, I'm just ready to do something else with my life, right? If they wanted to, and I don't think job shadowing is much of a thing as I remember when I was a kid, but is there a resource for them to be like, who can I interview to find out if I want to be in this career? Because I can ask those questions like, what is your day-to-day like? What are the working conditions of a Boilermaker, or whatever,
Sure.
Would they be reaching out to you about that? Is there another resource somewhere that they would be able to?
So I will say, I'm probably not the best connection for any type of work that could be done. Although if somebody wants to know what an economist does or what data analytics look like, but what I will say is that the interesting thing about Eugene in particular, it is the perfect size. You say, job shadowing is not as much of a thing anymore. I honestly think most people in Eugene, if you reached out to them with a flattering email or some sort of contact to say like, hey, I'd love to know more about what you do. In my experience, most people in Eugene are like, yeah, you care about what I do. Come see what we do. I mean, I don't want to promise on everybody's behalf, but it's certainly much more likely to happen here in Eugene than it is. I've lived in other places in the U.S. People are just a little bit more closed off with that kind of thing. And folks in Eugene are a little bit more open. So if there's anybody listening that is in that position, I would strongly encourage them to try to find somebody that looks as close to where they'd like to be career-wise and just start a conversation. I think that's a really good way to do it. But there are, too, a lot of resources that there weren't, several decades back. So, for example, on Quality Info, you can go look at each one of those 800 occupations that I referenced. And for most of them, it starts with a pretty open, well-edited video about what this person does. So I'll share with you guys some examples if it's useful to include as references. But we basically have ways to find all the data you can on those 800 different occupations. What does a vet tech do? What sort of skills should they have? And to me, honestly, I'm trying not to assume everybody is as big of a turbo nerd as I am, but I honestly think it is kind of fun to play around with those ideas. You're like, oh, where does this lead me? What career is similar to this? Or, it's somewhat video game skill tree in terms of what are other things that you can do with these skill sets, or where do these people work in the community? So it's not always easy to find the information you need, but it is a lot easier than it used to be. And I really do think in Eugene, we have the advantage of this being a pretty diverse economy. There's lots of people doing different things and people being pretty open to sharing those ideas with people. You don't often get a lot of we're happening behind closed doors. You can't know what we do here. People are pretty open books mostly. So,
they're always willing to share.
Yeah.
A little bit ago, you said that you feel like a middle schooler. For our viewers, can you share a little bit of what your day-to-day looks like?
Yeah.
You're actually visiting some of these businesses?
Yeah, sometimes I do. I mean, a lot of my work is demand-driven, meaning if a business primarily, but if a school reaches out to me, I might provide data for that person, that group, right? So I am somebody that really thrives off variety, which is a real blessing in this role because it depends what people are reaching out to me. Today I'm answering questions about what's happening in Curry County, and then also talking about career technical education across Lane County and in all the school districts, or, so every day is different, and that's very cool. But I do data requests for individual businesses or groups or the chamber or other areas like that. I give presentations, so talking to groups and trying to help inform them about the economy, or even down to workshop type things, helping people access this sort of information through Quality Info, and write articles and do some more general research type stuff. So that's another element that is I'm always looking for some help and ideas on what do people want to know about the economy, what needs a little bit further investigation about what makes our economy unique, that kind of stuff. So.
Was there a recent project that you worked on where you're like, this is really cool and it's eye-opening and it really helped out the person that reached out to me or the person you reached out to?
Yeah.
What was the impact of that?
I have lots of contacts at Lane Community College, and they'll sometimes reach out to me and say, our department is considering how to change our training around this type of occupation. It could be a very general question like, can you tell us about what's changing with this or what's different? And so I get to kind of put on my thinking cap and see, what's the kind of newly emerging skills that somebody might need in this profession that's been around a long time or something like that. So it's a lot of critical thinking, it's a lot of problem solving, it's a lot of making the best use of what's available, and it's really fun in that respect. I get to talk about lots of different demographic things. So one of my favorite kind of I give a lot of presentations where I'm talking about essentially myth busting about the Eugene economy, and that's kind of fun to educate people in this way that I had to be educated when I first started. Things like Eugene is not just a college town, or there's all this different stuff happening in our community that you can't necessarily tell just from driving the streets. Like, did you know this incredible thing happens over in this corner of Eugene and that kind of thing. So yeah, I don't have a specific isolated example, but it's a experience I get to have on an almost daily basis. It's really fun.
Not quite instant gratification, but something where you're fulfilled often.
The best experience is seeing something that I, helped come out in the wild in a sort of like, oh, that's not quite what I said way. That's always fun. Of like, the basic truth was conveyed. No, but that's
it's like playing telephone, right? Like
Exactly.
It gets back to you and you're like, generally, but no, I didn't say that,
Yeah, it's only a problem if they say like, Henry Field says the economy is going to implode next year. It's like, well, I generally try to shy away from like that strong of a prediction.
Yeah, of course.
What's been the most interesting thing that you found here in Eugene?
Well, I mean, it's just been, I'll say too, right now, because we talked a little bit about unemployment. Right now, it's hard to find workers for a lot of businesses, right? And that extends to us as an employer as well. So I am currently on an interim basis covering all of Southern Oregon, everything Eugene South, right? So it's always fascinating to get to learn about the other economies in the regions of Oregon and compare them to what's happening in Eugene. That's like an ongoing education. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like all of these things, it's all been learning on the job. It's all been getting a deeper, nuanced appreciation for what's happening here. That's been like the process of doing this work.
You mentioned work from home or taking full advantage of the work from home. How did that shift the employment industry?
I mean, radically in so many ways, and a lot of ways that don't really need to be spelled out. For example, like I and probably you all at least are more hybrid than you used to be before 2020, right? Especially in like video editing, sound, that's all much more apt to be online than it used to be, right? And that's the case with a vast number of industries. The other kind of major things that I want to make sure people are aware of is hybrid schedules are very, very popular with workers. So making sure businesses that's something that I have only recently learned. Like 94% of people said in a recent Gallup poll that they would like to be at least hybrid. Only 6% said, yes, I'd like to be in the office full time if remote is a possibility in the job. And I don't know that businesses are even thinking that far forward in terms of that. That's not to say that your workforce is going to be totally dissatisfied if they're in the office, but it's another one of these kind of non-wage ways that businesses can be creative about how to bring people together. But in terms of how it affects the structure of the economy, there's all these kind of ripple effects that we're seeing right now in terms of what does downtown real estate look like when there's not as many people commuting there. It's not as pronounced here as it is in a place like Portland, but there's still a lot of these questions that are kind of like shaking out actively, and we're kind of in the phase of settling out and seeing how things have changed permanently and reacting to those changes. There's a lot of very positive things that come out as a result of that, and then there are some things that will probably still need to be considered. The employee engagement being among the many, many different issues. So
I've got a kind of a follow-up question to that. So now, folks working remote, living and working at home, a lot of those jobs are potentially outside of Eugene, outside of Oregon, for that matter. How does that impact our economy here in Eugene when we've got a decent portion of remote workers, but they're not doing the work in Eugene. They just live here.
This is another one. There's a lot of layers to this that could shake out positive or negative ways and might cancel each other out. So let me give you a couple examples here. So there was a lot of discussion early on in the response to COVID of like Eugene will be the type of place that benefits a lot from remote work. So for example, somebody might work for a Bay Area, California company, earn those wages and spend them in a place that has much lower cost of living than that, right?
Okay.
Then there's also the converse reverse side to that, which is, well, that also means there's no reason for people that work in a company in Eugene to actually live in Eugene and spend their dollars locally. So there's kind of this snake eating its own tail of where exactly did we end up on that? And I would just say, I think Eugene is a little bit better positioned than most places to take advantage of the things that are positives from that. But there are a couple concerns here. For example, we have a higher cost of living than the average place in the United States, particularly around housing. And so that makes it a little bit less of an exciting proposition for somebody to, work and spend their money, live here and spend their money locally relative to lots of other places. But I do think looking forward, I think Eugene should really think about how to take advantage of its kind of the different lanes that it's in to be able to support that. And also not think about this, which I don't think people in Eugene do, but other places in the U.S. definitely do. For example, thinking collaboratively about how to take advantage of that situation in conjunction with a Springfield, with a Cottage Grove, with a Coburg, versus a lot of other places in the U.S. are very concerned about, like, if it happens across my border, then it's a personal attack on me, right? Like, we're much more collaborative here. But there's different things that a Springfield could offer to a remote worker, for example, than Eugene might for someone else. So there's that kind of having a collaborative view of that kind of thing, I think, is really important. But to shortly answer your question, I don't think we know exactly where we've ended up on that, but there are a lot of advantages that Eugene has potentially grabbed out of that situation.
You talked. Can we talk a little bit more about the tools?
The Oregon Employment Department has two resources that I would draw people to, whether you're a business or a job seeker. Or student, anybody interested in knowing more. There's WorkSource, which is the office just north of the river on Oakmont. That is a great place for you to go, even if you're not actively on unemployment. You're considering a career change. There's lots of dedicated folks there that can help you access resources in the area. If you're a business, it's a really great resource to be able to take advantage of because they have specific services to help people connect to jobs. So they have a market of job seekers that you might not be able to find somewhere else. And then the other category of thing that I would encourage people to take full advantage of is this the website that I mentioned, qualityinfo.org. It sounds like a generic website, but it's Oregon specific. It is Oregon specific data. It's all of the data that the OED research department puts together. It's all of our articles. It's where you can go to find some of the stuff that I'm talking about or find our contact information.
Very cool. Is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners that you think would be helpful as we, get deeper into 2024?
We didn't talk a ton about the future. There's a lot of data available about for example, like 10-year job projections. I'll just go ahead and tease that and say go to Quality Info and find out more about that. But there's so much changing in our economy, and so much has changed in the last couple of years. So I think just staying on top of what you can about how that's changing and where you fit into that world, it's a really fun and interesting process, even though it can seem quite stressful at times for lots of businesses. But I just want to, help foster that creativity, and please reach out to me if I can be helpful in any of those.
Very cool. Wonderful. Well, Henry, thank you so much for being here. But if you've got another minute or so, we got some rapid fire questions. Okay.
Sounds great.
All right. So we got three. So number one. Whether it's a bar, restaurant, neighborhood, retail shop, little hidden gem in Eugene. What do you think's a hidden gem in Eugene that somebody just moved here, somebody's visiting, and you're like, man, I got to share this with you because this is a little piece of something special.
I have a great one. And this will probably be news to lots of folks who lived in Eugene before, because it's kind of one of those invisible things. I got really into aquariums in the pandemic as kind of my at-home hobby. And we have an incredible aquarium shop in Eugene called Pisces Aquaria. I don't know if any of you have passed it or seen it. It's in this it's on Blair. It's very cool. It's like, but the neat thing about it, it's a pretty small shop, but it has like some world-class things in there about how they set up aquariums and the types of plants they have available in there. So even if that doesn't interest you as I want to have an aquarium, it's a cool place to just go. It's kind of like this living museum. So I would encourage anybody to check that out.
Wow, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. They know me by name.
Well, I got to tell you,
you got to go.
That sounds like a hidden gem to me.
For sure, sure. It's great.
100%.
Okay, so question number 2.
Yeah.
All right. Are you a part of any organizations that you're passionate about that you feel that you would share with someone else in Eugene here that would want to get involved and help make some change somewhere?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I have my involvement in young professionals has dropped off in the last couple of years, but that has been a great avenue for me to get to meet different people and find out ways to be engaged. I think the Eugene Chamber Young Professional Program is a really interesting way to, again, meet, like, surface people that, oh, I didn't know this work was done in the community. Oh, that's a cool thing you're up to. Even just having this conversation with you all, like thinking about the type of work that you all do has been really fun. And I get to have that kind of conversation kind of every time I go to one of those meetings or am involved in some way. So including the summit has been a great thing to be part of. That would probably be my suggestion.
That's a great suggestion. We're a little biased, but
Yeah, of course.
This one's just to get to know you a little bit more. If you could have lunch with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
That's a good one.
Oh, gosh.
And it can be anybody. It is.
I'm not good at answering these type of like broad questions. I feel like my answer should be some incredible economist or whatever. I don't have like I don't have that background. I think it'd have to be I can't think of a specific figure. I think knowing somebody that lives in a vastly different historical time from us would be so interesting and fascinating. Like, just to get to know, like, what does your day-to-day life look like? This is a very bizarre example, but for illustration, I really enjoy these very dense history books like The Power Broker and by Robert Caro, which are famously just like so layered and nuanced about what happened in historical perspective. So, for example, there's a whole like 4-book series on Lyndon Johnson and what it was like to grow up in the hill country of Texas in a way where you have to like haul water to boil, to make any, to wash any clothes that you needed to. Just these things that we have no conception of in a modern sense. So somebody that did like manual labor in 200 years ago, just to kind of get like, what are the things that I don't even consider that a human had to do to wake up in the morning? That kind of thing. That's the most bizarre answer.
No, but that's very interesting because to that point, I think a lot of people forget about that. We live in just
and it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah,
it wasn't
for sure.
It really was like 200 years
when
ago.
When I tell my kids what it was like in the 90s, they're like, no, you have no idea.
Like, we could sit here and talk about dial-up, guys. That was something.
Commercials. You don't even know what commercials are.
Right.
You just get to watch whatever you want. Yeah, it's so easy. How quickly I became that "you kids get off my lawn" person.
I feel that. Thank you so much, Henry, for joining us today. If you're interested in using any of the tools or resources provided by Henry here, you can find the links in the description below. So what was your, what'd you think?
That was a great interview. I loved, in particular, the part that he was talking about being able to ask for help, right? Reaching out to people, in that Eugene is such a giving community that you can, if you want to learn more about a particular career or you have questions, you can just reach out to somebody, right? It's not really as scary as we make it seem in our heads,
I
right?
think that we all forget that a lot of people are willing to help, especially if it's something that interests them. They're always willing to talk about it. I remember back in high school, we had a project where we had to reach out to a CEO or a manager and interview them. And getting that project was a little bit daunting. I was just like, man, I got to reach out to somebody. I got to reach out to the CEO. Like, they're super busy. They don't have time for me. It's, all of these thoughts went through my mind, but then I reached out to someone and I immediately got a response. I was like, hey, I just want to, 15 minutes of your time to come and interview. I immediately got a response. I went there. They gave me swag. They made me feel so good. They made me feel important. But it was all because I asked for help. So I absolutely agree with Henry. I think that people should be willing to ask for help. And I think that is going to take you much further than trying to do it by yourself. And you will learn so much more faster. Well,
I think that's a good point too, is that you talk about not just doing it by yourself, right? I mean, a lot of the successful people, the successful things that happen in our lives end up being a collective effort.
That's right.
Right? People that you bring into your circle, right? So reaching out, whether it's email, phone call, in person, or whatever, take the chance.
Take the chance.
And
absolutely.
I mean, especially in Eugene, because we are so giving and we want people to succeed. I mean, that's the whole thing, right? So if you are interested in learning more about how to reach out, cold email outreaches, phone calls, things like that, we do have an episode coming up where we're going to be talking especially about that. So definitely tune in to that episode.
Yes.
I don't know where I was going with that. I kind of just rambled.
That's fine. That's fine. Now we have an episode in mind.
Yes, we're doing that. See what happens? You let me go, and I just like lock us into an episode.
Cool. Now people are gonna be like, "Hey, when is this episode rolling out?"
We never said that. Oh yeah, episode 2, right?
Okay, but I like that because we should have an episode of that.
Yeah.
Because I think that people are gonna be like, "Well, how do I reach out?"
I mean, I do that on the daily. So
You ask for help on the daily.
Well, I ask for help. I mean, like I've
You
definitely
just connect, collaborate.
I mean,
you use the word collaborate
like,
once.
Here's a good example. So when I first got started in my voiceover career, I wanted some professional coaching, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to work with, but I didn't want to work. I wanted to work with somebody who was like established, somebody who was already doing their thing.
Right.
And this particular coach, to me, is a celebrity. And I was like, there's no way this person is going to work with me. I'm just like some dude in Eugene. But I sat in front of my computer before work and I sat there frozen.
Yeah.
And I all I had to do was press like the send button.
Oh, it was all built out and everything?
It was built out. I had it all written
that.
and I was like, it would be great to work with you. I love your work. Da 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 da. And I was frozen. And as my time was dwindling because I had to get to work, I was like, you know what? Even if he says no, or even if I don't hear anything, I've done what I could here.
Yeah.
And there are more people I can reach out to. So you know what happened? About an hour later, as I'm at work doing my thing, I get a phone call from LA and
Wow.
it threw me for a loop. I was like, no way, it's this guy.
Wow.
And it was. And he's like, Brandon? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, this is the coach, and he's like, thank you for reaching out.
Yeah.
I wanted to call you because I'd love to work with you. And I was like, what?
And it just shows like if many people were doing that, even 3 or 4 people were doing that, they probably wouldn't have enough time to go all the way around. And the fact that he reached out, like it
Right.
just shows that not everybody is doing it, and it's a missed opportunity. So how did it go?
I mean, I studied with the guy for a whole year. I mean, it was amazing.
Wow.
It was worth it. And that was kind of the snowball effect.
Yeah.
After you do it once, it's easier to do it again.
Yeah.
And then you keep going. And then all of a sudden, it's not so scary because we're all just humans, right? We're all
Exactly.
just people. And, you can email a CEO. You can call a CEO.
You absolutely
You can do
can.
that stuff if you want to.
You absolutely can.
Sure, it may not always lead to an opportunity, but you can do it.
I like that you gave the example, not even the example, just that you were willing to share that you stayed on that, the not clicking the send button. I find myself in that position so often, not because not because I don't want to reach out, because I do reach out. And every time that I reach out, I'm like, this isn't even for the opportunity that might arise from this. This is just to get me comfortable with sending these things out. Because I do feel that every time I send it, initially, whenever I started my business, I was heavily trying to find more clients, and I was doing cold messaging, and that like almost just killed me inside, because there's so many emotions, just things. Does this person feel like I'm pestering them? Am I annoying? You know? But getting past that, like just sending it out. Yeah, sure. I sent 10 and 2 of them reached back. Like that's so much success compared to what I wouldn't have had.
Yeah, you're getting a 20% response rate. That's great.
My goodness. And but yeah, just hit send.
Just hit send. Yeah. And I think the other thing too is that we do as humans feel like we are pestering somebody or that we're annoying. But the reality is if the intentions are pure, like if they're good intentions, then what you're doing is it's called polite persistence.
Yeah.
You're being polite and you're being persistent about it. There's nothing wrong with that, right? If you're bringing value to the table, then it's just polite persistence. We all have inboxes that are constantly inundated with spam, with all those different things. And, as long as you can keep getting in front of somebody, that
absolutely
helps you move closer to, having that conversation that you want to have.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Alrighty. That is it from us. Thank you for tuning in. We will see you on the next one.
This episode of the Eugene Morning Hustle podcast was brought to you by the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce and sponsored by Ivan Torres of Business Block Studios and Brandon Miller Voiceover. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel where you get your podcasts, and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn to stay in the know. If you have any questions, topics, or guests you'd like us to dive into, send us a voice message on the Eugene Chamber Instagram page, and we'll feature you and your question on a future episode. Or shoot us an email at podcast@eugenechamber.com. Till next time, Eugene.